Wargaming released a brand new vehicle on World of Tanks console with the brand new season of World of Tanks. But is it actually worth it? Well, the short answer is absolutely not in terms of the tank on its own, and I'm going to give you a few reasons, and that's what this video is going to be about. The TS60, the kind of underlying cause of why this tank isn't particularly great is just based on the whole statistics surrounding this vehicle, and we'll delve into that alongside why Wargaming keep doing this sort of tank design when they look at a vehicle like the TS60 and some of the other tanks we've received recently, whereby now they're very hesitant to create anything that has any level of good to one specific characteristic within the game, and that's probably off the back of everyone complaining about the Tyrans and everything that comes alongside those tanks, which in fairness they were absolutely broken, overpowered vehicles that should never have entered into the game, but equally producing tanks that don't really have any novel real features such as the TS60 make a little bit of an annoying kind of game as well. So we're going to have a look at this vehicle. I've got a gameplay lined up at the end of it, but I want to talk about whether or not you should spend the 6,000 gold straight up to get this vehicle alongside some of the other bonuses that come with the Ultimate Season Pass. So for those of you that don't know, there's two different versions of the Season Pass. You've got the gift or just the standard Season Pass, which of course you can see I can gift it, it'll come up, or you can buy it for yourself. We've already got the Ultimate Season Pass, which was 6,000 gold, hence why we're doing the little review of this vehicle, and in general the vehicle that you get from paying 4,000 extra gold alongside some other rewards that come with the Ultimate Season Pass, which are that you get 25 level skips, etc. So you could factor that into the cost of this tank, making it a very, very cheap tier 9 premium vehicle. But the whole point is it actually worth paying any extra to get a tank that isn't particularly great? Well, in my opinion, no, not really. If you're never really going to play the tank, what's the point in paying the extra gold to get a vehicle that pretty much is not particularly great? So the TS60, why is it not particularly great? Well, there's an underlying cause to that. It is down to the fact that it doesn't really have anything special whatsoever, and you compare it to some of the other vehicles in the game that have A, either super high alpha, B, super high DPM, C, super high camo, or B, very, very good view range, or D, just super, super fast, and they have an option to move around the map. This vehicle is like a combination of what if you made a very, very average tank with all of the average statistics that you could possibly jump into one vehicle, and then pretend like it's gonna play good or fun and be a dynamic tank. And that's the main reason why I'm calling this tank a bit of a fail or a bit of a flop when it comes to this game and in general how it actually plays in the game, because of the fact that it doesn't feel rewarding. It is not a fun vehicle to play, which to all intents and purposes, the only reason I play this game is to have fun. And if I'm not having fun playing a tank that is, you know, you're having to pay for essentially, then why the hell would I ever recommend paying for a vehicle that I absolutely despise or find super boring, or B, just find atrocious? I'm never going to recommend a tank like that. So that is exactly why I would not recommend getting this vehicle. Yes, it's a brilliant price for a tier 9 premium vehicle that, you know, if you're just a collector of the game and you want the tank, it is worth it. But at the end of the day, is it worth it to play? I'm not so sure. And that is because you can see it has 400 alpha damage, which is, you know, okay if you're a medium tank, but this is a tank destroyer, it's a tier 9, and if we prop it up against some of the other tier 9s just as a comparison so you get an idea as to why I feel the way I do about the tier 60, is that, for example, you look at the TL7 Black, right? This has 360 alpha damage. Now, the thing with the TL7 Black is it's novel unique because it gets 4 shots in an autoloader with 360 damage and can deal a ton of damage all in one go. It gets a super long reload, which means the DPM isn't great, so yeah, it's not ideal. Whereas you then see the T30, this has a 750 damage option that you can play with the tank, and predominantly that is the focus of playing a TD like that. Then you have the Doom Turtle. This features heavily armoured vehicle with a big cannon, and so you are slow, but you have the armour to back it up and it works. And then you look at something like a Tortoise. Now this tank has somewhat okay armour to a degree, although if anyone knows the weak points it gets pumped. But the whole point about the Tortoise is this tank has incredible DPM. We're talking nearly 5,000 when you fully spec it out with a commander, etc. And all of the perks equipment. And then you look at the Conway, no armour but gets another derp gun. They all seem to have one really good thing about them, either their DPM, their armour, their speed, you know, their mobility, their flexibility, and unfortunately the TS60 just doesn't get any of that. It has 35 kilometers an hour top speed, making it one of the slower TDs in the game at tier 9, which means you can't really move forward that well. And you'd expect that given that it's a slower tank, it's going to have armour, which by the looks of things, it does have armour. It looks like it has armour. But unfortunately, when you look at the gigantic lower plate of this thing, it's 170mm thick, but it's not that well angled, and actually it's a very, very easy target to pen. With about 200 and something millimeters of penetration, you should be able to go through this thing every single time, which means pretty much any tier 9 you face will pen you in the lower plate, and it's huge. You've got the upper plate, which is made of 120mm thick. It's more well angled, so it's going to be difficult to pen, but because this tank's hull armor is in a weird kind of way, often people can actually aim down onto your upper plate, which makes it easier to pen. And so when you aim down on an upper plate that's only 120mm thick and you're reducing the angle of that plate, it's probably around 200mm when you're up close. So why am I saying up close? Well, sometimes you're going to be sniping. Well, yeah, you are going to be sniping in a TD typically, but this tank is a rear-mounted tank, which is supposed to be able to fight on a corner, but as soon as you try and do that, its upper plate gets exposed, and because you're so close, people are aiming down onto your upper plate, making it almost pennable by every standard of the game. Then you get the typical side weak point of the turret, which you can see here on the left and right hand side, and all of that zone. It's all a weak point. When you try and side scrape with this vehicle, you can get penned there very easily. You see it on things like the FV215B, the actual heavy tank from the British line. They all have the same. The Panzer 7, these sorts of vehicles have that sort of area on the turret ring where it bulges out from the side of the actual hull armor. And so yeah, that's a weak point. Brilliant. We've got a weak point when you try and side scrape, and then also when you try and side scrape as well, your armor is 80mm thick, so a small over angle of this thing against a lot of the heavily armored super high damage tanks that you'll be facing in this thing, considering you'll be brawling or supposed to be brawling in it. Yeah, they're going to go straight through you with 80mm, even at angles like this, because they just have the sheer amount of penetration. Of course, if you over angle to the point where people are just going to auto bounce, yes, you can bounce. Obviously, that's the same with any tank in the game, provided your armor isn't, 20mm thick or something, because they can overmatch you. But the problem is, okay, so you've got not the greatest armor in the game, you're not the fastest at all, you're actually pretty slow. You've also got a cupola on the tank which can be penned quite easily, it's quite prominent as well on the top of it. The actual frontal turret armor might seem like it's pretty strong, but it's actually very flat as well. So if you're looking at it from this sort of angle, when it's angling, you can pen it. It's only 200mm thick. And then, of course, you've got flatter parts underneath the gun mantlet. You can pen really easily. This area here that you can see underneath, that can be penned really, really easily. It is literally just flat, but 300mm thick. So premium rounds from TDs and the heavies are going to go through that. So yet again, even if they hit you in those sorts of regions that are supposed to be the strongest armor, because it's flat, it's not going to actually bounce anything. Of course, you'll bounce tier 8s, tier 7, tier 9s and stuff like that, of course, and tier 7s, but at the end of the day, it is going to be a struggle to make this tank work with its armor, and most of the time, you're just going to get penned. So that's a big, big problem with this tank, is it doesn't have the armor. So it doesn't get armor, doesn't get speed. Its alpha damage is 400, so it's actually on the lower side, and in order to make the alpha damage work, surely it would get DPM. Nope, this tank gets 3,500 with the fully spec'd crew with all of the perks you can possibly put on this thing to get a DPM. I haven't got vents in this tank, which you could do to get an additional slight bonus to your DPM, but it's not worth it in my opinion. And you'll probably get up to like 3,650, something like that, maybe slightly higher, which sounds good, but at the end of the day you're only dealing 400 damage and you're also very slow, so you can't actually come around a corner quite quickly to get the second shot in. Often people will move away from you faster than you can get towards them to get a second shot in, and it often leads to a lot of trades where you're just taking more damage than you're actually dealing out, even as someone that knows or has played a lot of World of Tanks console. This tank is not an easy one to play straight out of the box. You'll get used to it, and certainly you can have good games. I'm not trying to say this tank is absolute garbage. I actually think creating balanced tanks is a good way to go. This one is definitely a balanced tank, but it's balanced in a way that they've just given it average everything. And by giving it average everything, it doesn't make it appealing because it's not good at any one thing. And whereas we used to have in the past with premium tanks that were really hyped up, tanks that were, you know, back in the day, super cool, super novel, super unique, where, you know, they may have had really good DPM, but they had nothing else. Or maybe they had really good armor, but they were slow. Or maybe they had, you know, a really nice top speed limit, but maybe sacrificed a lot in order to get that top speed. Now it seems like they're just basically balancing vehicles by just producing very bog standard average vehicles in all regards, which obviously isn't fun. I mean, it's cool to have one really good thing about your tank, utilize it and think about how you're going to play utilizing that top thing. But unfortunately, this just feels like a missed opportunity, as with all of the buffs that we've recently seen with this update, which I highly recommend if you haven't already. Go check out the buff update where we break down exactly what the buffs have been during this update. If you're seeing Gorillas with a fully traversable turret, it's because of that update. It was a shambolic update in my eyes in terms of balancing vehicles in the game, buffing tanks that were already pretty good and had no complaints, whilst leaving some of the tanks that were pretty bad in the same sort of state. Introducing nerfs to vehicles that no one had literally asked. It was literally a case of who asked, and literally no one did. And they nerfed some of the tanks like the Minotauro. Yeah, it was a shambolic update in terms of balancing. In my opinion, I really hated it. I don't feel like the tanks that deserved the buffs got the buffs, and some of the tanks that did get the buffs didn't deserve the buffs. So yeah, what a great update. I was really hoping that it could be some good changes and that some of the tanks that deserve to would get a bit more love from this recent update, but it's not the case. So yeah, overall, not feeling too happy about the whole release of this new season. There are definitely some really good things. I think the new garage looks better and stuff like that. There's some new garage gear, it's cool, but is it gonna actually make the game better when you're actually playing in the game? No, that is the key problem with some of these updates. Is there, yeah, nice glitter on how you say, I don't know, you know what, you know the saying, you're trying to glitter up something that isn't so nice. So yeah, the TS60 is one of those tanks. It is a bit of a turd, and unfortunately it's not really great at doing a whole lot, but it's a balanced tank, but not in the way that I would have recommended to do it. One way that they could have done this tank is to give it some really nice DPM, but sacrifice all of the armor and just make it a DPM machine. And I'm not talking crazy amounts, I'm not talking tortoise levels, I'm just talking a bit, you know, maybe touch up the speed just a touch, and give it some more DPM, sacrifice all of the armor, and yeah, make it a bit better. Maybe give it worse camo, so that it is a little bit more balanced in terms of if you're buffing the DPM and buffing the speed, having worse camo would counter that a little bit. Or equally, give it more camo and make it just as it is right now. they did neither, and so it feels like a bit of a letdown when you play it. So that's just my overall opinion on this tank. In terms of setting it up, we went with advanced loader, advanced optics, advanced concealment. I would definitely drop out advanced concealment to run traction system. The speed is terrible on this thing. It feels awful to drive, and that is definitely going to be a big bonus to have some extra speed in this thing, as well as the chassis and whole rotation speed will be nice to have, so I'd recommend doing that. Also, the accuracy of this vehicle feels horrendous compared to everything else, which for a tank that's supposed to be pretty good, as a tank destroyer with lower alpha, you'd expect the accuracy to be pretty good. I mean, for example, the Tortoise has a 0.3 accuracy on it. This tank with a commander in, the Tortoise doesn't even have a commander, by the way, this has 0.34. Which is pretty garbage. I mean, it's up there with, let's just take, for example, a tier 10 from the British line. Let's grab up the FE 4005. I wonder what the accuracy is on this tank. So, oh, surprise, surprise, the FE 4005 with a 0.35 accuracy without a commander has basically the same as the tier 9. Yeah, the tier 60 has not the greatest of accuracies. And of course, some of you may not even have all of the bonuses and the perks and the equipment to put on this vehicle, making it even worse to actually hit people reliably. And then combine that with what they don't actually give you here, which is the dispersion values of the tank. This has horrendous dispersion by what I've actually seen of it and by playing it. The bloom on the accuracy is horrendous. Like, we're talking KV2 levels when it is moving, making it very difficult to aim in, and often by the time that someone's hit you, you are not even quite aimed in. And even though the aiming time says it's 1.57 seconds, because of the bloom and the dispersion, it's huge. It means that that aiming time is drastically increased to be able to actually fully aim from a fully bloomed out gun, which is a problem. It's definitely a problem with this vehicle, and it feels really annoying to play, because yeah, people can poke you. By the time you turn slightly, they're probably already behind cover, and by the time you've aimed, they're probably behind cover, so it just feels pain is what I'd like to say. There you go. E4, same sort of story, basically the same accuracy without a commander. E3, same accuracy without a commander. You get my drift. It doesn't have good accuracy, which for a tank that is supposedly, you know, going to be a brawler that is supposed to have lower alpha for a reason, to have either TPM or whatever, it's got to get something good, and there isn't really a whole lot from what I can find of this tank. So with that being said, let's jump into the gameplay. I'm really interested before then, though, to see what you think of this tank. Have you picked it up? Have you watched some of the other content community contributors? Have you seen what they think of this tank? Do you agree with them? I'm interested to see what you guys actually think about this tank, and not only this tank, but this entire season. For me, really big letdown, and I was really hoping that it would be a great one, but yeah, it's annoying that I have to be in this negative mood about the season. I really want to be happy, but you know, when things like this happen, you can't. You want to be truthful, and I'm not going to sit here and lie about how amazing it is right now playing this game with the current changes that they've added into the game. It's not all that bad things. They did buff some good buffs. They made some good choices. The Gorilla 15, that sort of thing, giving it a little bit of something extra. Yeah, there are some good things, but there's also a lot of things that didn't need to be added in, that I feel like have overshadowed all of the good things that were actually added into the game. One step forward, two steps back, and that's what it feels like with this update, even just from a player perspective. And of course, my opinion means no more than you. I just wanted to really talk about the game, and of course this tank in particular, for those of you that are wondering about my opinions on this tank. But let's jump into the gameplay now and see how we ended up actually having an okay game. Yeah, so the first game is on canals, and this map was, or this match in general was just a shambles. I won't lie. It just was not a good game. Even though we had an okay result to all intents and purposes, the whole game was just a shambles. So What you can see here is the bloom on the accuracy. Hopefully in a second you can see the circle's pretty big, and it's almost the same size as the actual outer circle that you get with the reticle, which is never a good sign when you're looking at a tank that has low alpha, because that means that it's horrendously inaccurate compared to everything else. And I agree that if they nerfed accuracy in general, this tank would, and kept this the same, it would actually not be bad, because, you know, it had the average sort of accuracy. But when the accuracy is so good on higher alpha TDs, then why have low alpha? Yeah, not great. That shot was probably more aim than anything else. I'm not going to blame it on the tank's accuracy. We're going for the cupola of the chieftain, not ideal. We didn't quite have the penetration to go through. If we had heat, we probably would have done. We've got a YOLO wagon, Rheinmetall Panzer wagon, that for some reason hasn't taken a hit, YOLOing through the middle of the map at the beginning of the game. I don't know why light tanks do it, but they do. If you're a light tank driver that does this, please never do it again. I mean, 90% of the games, you're not going to do well. And those 10% of the games, you're probably still doing worse than if you didn't play like these guys. Yeah, and this is one class example of a T49 playing way too silly and ends up getting taken out with probably doing one shot of damage or something. So, yeah, not a good idea. The Panzer wagon, of course, over here. I can't get a shot on him quite, and now we're moving down to this location. The primary reason for why I've come down here is to get a couple of shots and to spot for the team who are up on top of the hill, and hopefully they'll help me out. The Leopard 1's over here, so we get a quick shot into him. Ideally you want to pull out side scraping, but this tank's so slow that I would not have had opportunity to actually pull out in the optimal direction to side scrape there, and if I did, maybe I could have hit him, but it would have been reliant on RNG, and of course the Leopard's pretty fast, where he would have probably got behind the cover before I even got there. Now we bounce our first round in this tank. That's because it hits the upper plate when we're angled upwards to the Rheinmetall, so it increased the effective armor. Probably shouldn't rely on that at all in this game. You can see here the Leopard 1 is out in the open. We've also got a Shashka that's at the back, so hopefully we can get a shot on him, which we do, which is nice. And of course the DPM when you are using the tank is not awful, but it's the speed combined with it that make the effective damage per minute quite bad, because essentially what you're relying on, terrible aim shot there, is to essentially hit people consistently. You have to be near them, or at least have the option to push forward towards them, and that is not the case with this tank right now. The Rheinmetall is auto-aiming us. I mean, pretty much if you're auto-aiming a vehicle at this sort of range, you probably wouldn't be likely to hit. The Murat, of course, the one tank you don't want to see behind you. The autoloader does manage to get us, and we don't quite fire quick enough to get a snapshot on him. This tank does not have a fully traversable turret as well, because it definitely needed to not have a fully traversable turret, because otherwise it would be overpowered, right? At this point, it's game over. What are we going to do? We're on 400 hit points. The enemy tanks have kind of surrounded us. We've got no map control. There's so many people up on top of the hill who didn't take out the guys. The Murat is now behind us and we're gone. And yeah. Could we have escaped? No, we're too slow. Should we have gone to that position? Don't know. Do we have gun depression to use the hill area and actually get effective shots to get the same amount of damage that we did, and maybe even more? Probably not. Yeah, it's a tough tank. And it's definitely one I think will be... It's got a low skill cap to the point where, like, if you're skilled at the game, it's going to be stopping you, the actual tank itself, from actually doing well. Our M48 here is just auto-aiming this AVRE, and this is probably why people complain a ton about the AVRE. The reason why you're not penning is because you're auto-aiming it. There's no reason to auto-aim an AVRE. It's actually one of the tanks you basically can't auto-aim. So, yep, don't go auto-aiming AVREs, please, if you see them in the game. Actually aim, you can aim for the very lower plate of an AVRE, as well as in between the little plates on the front of the tank, the plough. It gets a little raised bit of the plough, which has a hole in it. You can shoot through there into the upper plate you'll pen pretty much every time, or shoot at the cupola, or try and get the side of the AVRE. Any of those things you can pen, auto-aiming it through the front. because the centre of mass is basically the hull armour, and because the centre of mass is going to line up with that plough, you'll never pen. So please never pen auto-aim the AVRE. He basically led to the death of our teammate there. So yeah, not great. Either way, that is the tier 60. I don't want to drag this on to be a complaining fest or anything like that. I really want to be a positive impact on the community. I just wanted to be really brutally honest and hopefully convey my feelings about this tank and give you an honest review, because that is ultimately what it's all about. And also calling out Wargaming for when they make decisions that I feel don't or aren't in line with what I feel like you guys actually think. If you think completely differently to what I'm making the statement of, then make sure you let me know, because at the end of the day, my job here is to give you guys a voice and to call out stuff which we think isn't a good idea. So if you don't think it's a good idea, let me know. And of course, if you think anything else is a good idea, all of the positives, let me know as well, because, you know, we can showcase some of that stuff. And I'm really excited to try out the Grilla and some of the other tanks that got buffed that weren't necessarily already amazing in the first place. I think that would be a good couple of videos to actually make. So stay tuned for those. Those will be much better than seeing this piece of garbage actually in the game. So with that being said, I hope you did enjoy. If you've got any questions, let me know as well, and I will see you in the next one. Have a great rest of the day, and I hope you enjoy this season more so than I am right now.